I'm Elise Harper, the shadow my family never saw. And right now, I'm pressed against a crumbling brick wall in a savannah alley, heart hammering like it's trying to escape. The air's thick with river rot and rain, the streetlights barely cutting through the fog. Footsteps echo closer, slow, deliberate, a predator's pace. My wine-red scarf catches on a jagged pipe, tearing further, but I don't dare move. A glint of steel flashes in the stranger's hand, his shadow looming on the wet cobblestones. Why did I come here? Chasing a favor for someone else? And why does Vivian's mocking voice still ring louder than the danger in front of me? Hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. I woke with a start, my hand clutching the scarf still draped across my chest. The nightmare lingered, its claws sinking into the edges of my mind, but the soft hum of my apartment's radiator grounded me. It was just a dream, I told myself, though the growl felt too real, too much like the menace I'd sensed in my sister Vivian's voice earlier that day. I glanced at the clock, 6:30 a.m., November in Savannah, Georgia, where the mornings carried a chill that didn't quite match the city's warm reputation. I had a mission today, one that didn't involve running from shadows but might feel just as dangerous. I dressed simply, thrifted jeans, clean but faded, a sweater I'd mended twice, and my wine-red scarf, soft against my neck. It wasn't just a thrift store find. It was a talisman, bought years ago at a Savannah street fair, when $20 felt like a rebellion against my family's dismissal. I needed it today, not for warmth, but for courage. I was headed to the Savannah Riverfront Bank, where Vivian Tate, my older sister and branch manager, held court. I wasn't there for myself. Mrs. Calhoun, my neighbor in the apartment below, had asked for help last night. Her hands trembled as she poured tea, her fridge nearly empty, her smile too bright to hide the worry. "Just until Friday, Elise," she'd said, asking for $100 to cover groceries. Mrs. Calhoun had taught me to read in 3rd grade, her patience a rare light in my childhood. $100 would keep her pantry from going hollow, and that was reason enough. The walk to River Street was quiet, the city still waking under a grey sky. Moss-draped oaks lined the squares, their branches swaying like whispers of Savannah's old secrets. The river glinted dully, its surface rippled by a restless breeze. I pulled my scarf tighter, the fibers familiar under my fingers, and stepped through the heavy glass doors of the bank. The lobby smelled of magnolia and polished wood, a sanitized elegance that made my warm boots feel louder than they were. Sleek marble floors shimmered under fluorescent lights, and everyone inside, clients in tailored suits, tellers in crisp blouses, looked like they belonged. I didn't, not in their eyes, but I stood tall anyway, joining the line with a steady heart. The wait was slow, the air thick with the soft clack of keyboards and murmured transactions. I kept my eyes forward, ignoring the glances that crawled over me, the kind people give when they can't decide if you're lost or just poor. Then I heard it, a voice like polished glass, sharp enough to cut without breaking. "Well, isn't this a surprise?" Vivian. She stood behind me, her winter white suit pristine, her heels clicking like punctuation marks across the tile. Her smile was practiced, performative, loud enough to turn heads. A young teller trailed her, looking nervous, clutching a tablet like a shield. "Elise," Vivian said, her tone syrupy, but carrying to the man in a navy suit checking his phone, the older woman near the window counting cash. "Still using this branch, are we?" I didn't answer, not yet. I met her eyes, noting the same smug tilt to her chin, the same painted lips that had called me useless at a family dinner years ago. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "You know we've updated our client tiers. We don't really serve walk-ins anymore." Then louder, as if for the whole lobby. "Especially not beggars." The word landed like a slap in a cathedral, echoing off the marble. The man in the suit looked up. The older woman turned her head. A teller froze mid-keystroke. I stood still, my face unchanged, though my pulse quickened. Vivian's smile widened, as if she'd just done me a favor. "You do understand, don't you?" she added, her voice dripping with false charity. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because I'd learned long ago that silence can be louder than shouting. My fingers brushed the scarf at my neck, grounding me, and I stepped out of line. My boots made no sound on the tile as I walked past Vivian, past the stairs, past the weight of her words. Outside, the savannah air kissed my face with a kind of mercy, cool and sharp off the river. My reflection lingered in the bank's polished glass doors, head high, eyes steady, scarf a slash of red against the grey. I didn't cry. I hadn't in years. But as I walked back toward Forsyth Park, the nightmare's growl echoed faintly, mingling with Vivian's laughter. She thought she'd won, thought she'd stripped me bare in front of Savannah's elite. She didn't know I held the keys to a vault she couldn't imagine, one that could empty her world with a single command. Back in my apartment, I'd open my laptop, type a passphrase, and set something in motion. Not just for me, but for Mrs. Calhoun, for Arthur, for every time I'd been told I was nothing. Vivian's voice might have chased me today, but tomorrow, I'd be the one leading the chase. The walk back to my apartment felt longer than it should have, each step on Savannah's cobblestone streets heavier than the last. The late autumn air clung to me, humid and thick, carrying the faint tang of the Savannah River. My wine-red scarf, torn slightly from that nightmare's imagined snag, hung loosely around my neck, its fibers a quiet reminder of who I'd been before Vivian's words sliced through the bank's marble lobby. Beggars, she'd called me, her voice echoing like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. I could still see the man in the navy suit glancing up, the older woman's head turning, the teller's fingers freezing on her keyboard. But I didn't run this time, not like in the dream. I walked, head high, eyes fixed on the moss-draped oaks lining Forsyth Park. Inside my apartment, the radiator hummed softly, a familiar drone that grounded me. The space smelled of peppermint tea and old books, my kind of peace. I set my scarf on the dining table, folding it once, then again, my fingers lingering on the frayed edge. The nightmare's growl lingered too, but it wasn't fear driving me now. It was purpose. I slid the old laptop from beneath the couch cushion, its edges worn smooth from years of use. The screen flickered twice before settling, a faint blue glow casting shadows across the room. I typed my passphrase, "Foxglove never forgets," my fingers moving without hesitation. A soft ping broke the silence. One message, encrypted, expected. "Ready when you are," it read. Signed simply, R. Ray, my partner in Shellcode Holdings, never asked questions. We'd designed it that way, clean, no back and forth, just action. I leaned back, the chair creaking under me, and let my mind drift to a summer long ago in Savannah. I was 10, kneeling in my grandfather Arthur Boone's garden, the air heavy with jasmine and earth. He'd handed me a faded blue savings book, his calloused fingers brushing mine. "Build something they can't ignore, Elise," he'd said, his voice rough but warm, like the oak trees he loved. "They'll laugh, but you keep building." My family had laughed plenty, Vivian, Clara, even my mother Evelyn, calling me a dreamer, a leech, a girl with no place at their table. Arthur was the only one who saw me, who gave me a foundation when the world felt like quicksand. I shook off the memory and opened the portal. The interface was sleek, untraceable, a digital vault few in the world could access. My name wasn't on it, that was intentional. In another life, I'd gone by M. Sparrow, an alias born from an inside joke and a real bird I'd nursed back to health on a foster farm in coastal Georgia. I'd built Shellcode Holdings from nothing, a fintech empire woven through 5 countries, each layer a wall of anonymity. Ray raised the initial capital, but I designed the system, airtight, unbreakable, the kind that made headlines without ever naming us. By year 2, I held the majority stake, tucked behind fiduciary shadows. Vivian's bank had chased our liquidity for years, finally securing a portion last quarter. She'd signed the contract herself, oblivious to the name behind it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I typed, "Show active accounts under Shellcode Holdings." The screen populated instantly, numbers scrolling in quiet precision. $3.5 billion in liquid assets. It wasn't just money, it was leverage, time, power. I could buy silence, break dignity, reclaim what they'd tried to erase. For a moment, I saw Mrs. Calhoun's trembling hands, her empty fridge, her smile hiding hunger. This wasn't just for me, It was for her, for Arthur, for every time I'd been told I was nothing. I typed the command, initiate full withdrawal, Savannah Riverfront Bank, primary account. The system prompted a confirmation. My finger lingered, a flicker of doubt creeping in. What if they were right? What if I was still the girl they'd laughed out of their world? Then I heard Vivian's voice again. We don't serve beggars. And I pressed enter. The room didn't change. Nothing exploded. But inside me, something shifted, like a thread tangled for years snapping into place. The screen flashed. Withdrawal authorized. Audit lockdown initiated. I closed the laptop slowly, its weight solid in my hands. My heart didn't race. It slowed, steady with purpose. I reached for my phone and dialed a number no one in my family knew I had. The line connected. Hey, I said, voice calm. It's Elise. I need a favor. The rest of the night passed in a haze. I made a cup of peppermint tea I barely touched, the steam curling upward like a question mark. Outside, Savannah's streets gleamed with moisture from an evening drizzle, streetlights flickering against wet pavement. I stood by the window, my scarf back around my neck, its torn edge a badge now, not a wound. Vivian didn't call. She never did. But I imagined her face if she knew who held the keys to her bank's ruin. Tomorrow I'd walk back into that marble lobby, not as the beggar she'd mocked, but as the shadow she'd never seen coming. The game was on, and I was no longer playing by their rules. Morning broke over Savannah with a golden haze, the sun glinting off the Savannah River like a promise I was ready to keep. I adjusted my wine-red scarf, its torn edge tucked neatly against my collar, and stepped out of my apartment. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of salt and magnolia, a reminder of the city's stubborn charm. River Street bustled quietly, vendors setting up carts, tourists snapping photos of the riverfront, but I moved with purpose, my boots steady on the cobblestones. Today wasn't about running, like in my nightmare. Today I was walking into Vivian's world to turn it upside down. The Savannah Riverfront Bank loomed ahead, its glass doors catching the morning light like a mirror I'd shatter. I carried a sleek black folio under my arm, its contents heavier than the leather suggested. Inside, a QR code linked to Shellcode Holdings, my invisible empire, and a directive that would freeze Vivian's bank in its tracks. I paused at the base of the steps, letting the moment settle. My hands were calm, no trembling, no second thoughts. A man in a grey suit held the door open. "Ma'am," he nodded. I smiled politely and stepped inside. The lobby was the same as yesterday. Polished wood, magnolia air, marble floors that made my thrifted jeans feel out of place. But today I didn't feel the weight of their stares. I walked to the reception desk, where a young woman I didn't recognize sat, her name tag reading Lila. "Good morning," I said softly, sliding the folio across the counter. "I have an appointment. It's under Shellcode Holdings." Lila's eyes flicked to the folio, then to her screen. It blinked red, and a flicker of confusion crossed her face. "I'll need to get the manager," she said, reaching for the phone. Before she could dial, Vivian appeared, crossing the lobby like a storm cloud in heels. Her hair was curled tighter today, her makeup sharper, but her smile was gone. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "I told you yesterday we're not a charity. Whatever stunt you're pulling, don't." I didn't reply, just nodded to Lila, who opened the folio and scanned the QR code. Her screen flashed again, and she froze. Vivian snatched the folio from her hands. "Enough. Let's see what my little sister thinks she's playing at." She flipped through the papers, her smirk slipping with each page. Her eyes froze, her breath catching as she read the withdrawal order. $3.5 billion, Shellcode Holdings, immediate execution. That can't be real," she stammered, flipping another page. "This is some kind of fake." I met her gaze, steady and unyielding. "It's real, Vivian. You've been working for me indirectly all these years, while laughing behind my back." The branch manager, Mr. Langley, arrived, a tall man with silver hair and a calm that masked crisis training. He took the folio from Vivian's trembling hands. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said to me, then glanced at his tablet. He typed, paused, and looked up, his face unreadable. "This is a VIP-level authorization. Primary withdrawal request flagged as sensitive. Shellcode Holdings." He turned to Vivian, his voice lower. You're listed as an employee in a partnered entity. Did you know? The lobby fell silent, not just quiet, but suspended, like the air before a storm breaks. A junior banker glanced over. Lila's hands fidgeted on her tablet. Vivian backed up half a step, her face draining of color. That's impossible, she whispered, but her voice cracked. I stood still, my scarf a quiet anchor. You called me a beggar yesterday, I said, my voice low, even. But you signed my contract 3 months ago. You just didn't know it was mine. Mr. Langley tapped his tablet. Withdrawal authorized. Amount $3.5 billion. Entity signature lockdown initiated for audit compliance. Lobby closed pending security validation. Lila locked the front doors with a soft click. A younger associate dropped her pen, the sound sharp in the silence. Vivian's mouth opened, but no words came. Then, like something broke inside her, she stumbled forward and dropped to her knees, right there on the marble floor. Elise, she whispered, eyes wide, almost pleading. Don't do this. You don't understand what this will do to me. I have a child, a career. I tilted my head slightly, my voice steady. You ruined yourself, Vivian. I just stopped hiding. Someone behind a cubicle gasped. Mr. Langley didn't intervene. No one did. Vivian shook her head, mascara smudging beneath her eyes. You're my sister, she said, her voice barely audible. Am I asked. You made it clear I wasn't family long ago. The silence stretched, heavy as the river outside. I turned to Mr. Langley. I'd like to speak to someone from the executive suite privately. This doesn't need to be handled on the main floor. He nodded, pressing a call button for the internal elevator. As I walked past Vivian, still frozen on her knees, I didn't glance down. The folio stayed tucked under my arm, and as the glass doors of the elevator slid shut, I heard nothing but the hum of overhead lights. The real storm wasn't here. It was waiting with my family, and I was ready to face it. The late November sun hung low over Savannah, casting golden slants through the moss-draped oaks of Johnson Square. I adjusted my wine-red scarf, its torn edge now a quiet badge of defiance, and walked toward the Grey, a historic restaurant housed in a former bus station. Its sleek exterior belied the weight of the meeting I was about to face. My sister Clara and her husband Nathan had called last night, their voices tight with something closer to panic than affection. Brunch, Elise, Clara had purred, as if we were still kids sharing secrets. Just family, to reconnect. I knew better. Vivian's collapse at the bank yesterday had sent ripples through our family, and they were scrambling to dam the flood. I stepped inside, the air warm with the scent of rosemary and fresh linen. The Grey's interior blended southern charm with modern elegance, exposed brick walls, polished wood tables, and pendant lights that glowed like fireflies. A hostess in a black dress led me to a private room at the back where Clara and Nathan waited. Clara stood as I entered, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, her smile as practiced as Vivian's had been in the bank lobby. Elise, you look grounded, she said, her tone sweet but probing. Nathan, in a tailored blazer, offered a stiff nod, his investor grin pasted on like a billboard. Good to see you, Elise. Been too long. I slid into a chair, my scarf brushing the table's edge, and said nothing. The silence stretched, broken only by the clink of a water glass as Clara sat back down. She leaned forward, her Chanel earrings catching the light. We heard about the bank, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Vivian's in a state, poor thing. We just want to make sure you're okay. Nathan chimed in too quickly. Yeah, that was quite a move. Impressive, really. We didn't know you were so involved. I met Clara's eyes, then Nathan's, my face unreadable. Involved? I echoed, letting the word hang. Clara's smile faltered, but she pressed on. Look, families have misunderstandings. We've all been through a lot since Dad passed. Maybe we didn't always include you the way we should have. Her voice trembled just enough to seem sincere, but I knew her tricks. I'd seen them at Christmas parties, at estate meetings, when she'd called me a leech behind my back while sipping champagne. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single document, a deed stamped active in red ink. I slid it across the table, the paper whispering against the wood. The Boone Land Trust, I said, my voice calm but firm. Coastal Georgia, 3,000 acres. You thought it was dissolved years ago, didn't you? Clara's wineglass trembled in her hand, a faint clink against the table. Nathan's grin froze. "What's this?" he asked, reaching for the deed. I didn't stop him. He scanned it, his eyes widening at the date, the signatures, the legal weight of a trust they'd buried in their greed. "Arthur set it up for me," I said, leaning back. "Before he died, he knew you'd try to erase me, so he gave me something you couldn't touch." Clara's face paled, her lips parting but no words coming. I let the silence grow, heavy as Savannah's humid air. A memory flashed. Christmas, 5 years ago. Clara's laughter ringing through our family's Tybee Island beach house. "Elise, a leech?" she'd said to a cousin, not knowing I was in the hall. "She's lucky we let her show up." I'd left that night, my scarf my only warmth against the coastal wind, whispering to myself that one day they'd see. Nathan cleared his throat, forcing a chuckle. "This is unexpected, Elise. But let's not overreact. We can work this out, right? Family first." I tilted my head, my scarf's torn edge catching the light. "Family?" I said softly. "You stopped being that when you laughed me out of Dad's will." Clara's hand tightened around her glass. "That's not fair," she snapped, her voice rising. "We were protecting the estate. You weren't ready for—" "Ready?" I cut in, my voice steady but sharp. "I built shell code holdings while you were signing checks you didn't earn. I'm more ready than you'll ever be." The room went still, the hum of the restaurant outside fading. Clara's daughter, Sophie, a college student I'd barely seen in years, lingered in the doorway. Her dark eyes flicked between us, curious, maybe hopeful. I hadn't noticed her arrive, but her presence shifted something in me. A flicker of possibility, a chance to break the cycle. I stood, tucking the deed back into my bag. "This isn't a negotiation," I said. "It's a courtesy. You'll hear from my lawyer soon." Clara's mouth opened, but no words came. Nathan stammered, "Elise, wait, let's—" But I was already moving toward the door. Sophie stepped aside, her gaze lingering on me, not with judgment, but with something like respect. I paused, meeting her eyes for a moment, then walked out. The gray's warm lights faded behind me, and Savannah's evening air hit my face, cool and sharp. I didn't look back, but I felt Clara's panic trailing me like a shadow. That night in my apartment overlooking Forsyth Park, I stood by the window, my scarf draped over my shoulders. The city's squares glowed under streetlights, their oaks whispering secrets older than my family's lies. Clara's call would come soon, or Nathan's, or maybe Evelyn's. They'd try to pull me back, to smooth over what I'd just shattered. But I wasn't the girl they'd laughed at anymore. I was Emma Sparrow, the architect of their undoing, and I was just getting started. Tomorrow a letter would slide under my door, one that would cut deeper than Vivian's words or Clara's smiles. And when it did, I'd be ready to face the truth it carried. The rain started just after I got home, tapping its fingers gently against my apartment's tall windows, like it was waiting for something to break. Savannah's late autumn storms had a way of sneaking up, turning the city's golden squares into a blur of grey and green. I lit a single lamp in the corner, its soft glow pooling across the hardwood floor, and tried to settle into the quiet. My wine-red scarf hung by the door, its torn edge catching the light like a wound I hadn't yet tended. The brunch with Clara and Nathan still lingered, their fake smiles and trembling hands replaying in my mind. But it was Sophie's curious gaze that stuck with me, a spark of something new in the ashes of our family. I was reaching for a blanket when I saw it. An envelope slid neatly under my door. No knock, no footsteps, just there, like it had always belonged. My heart stilled, not with fear but with recognition. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Evelyn's, my mother's, neat and sharp, the kind that said everything was under control even when it wasn't. I stared at it, my fingers hovering, as if touching it might burn. After years of her silence, her clipped nods at family gatherings, her absence when Vivian and Clara carved me out of our legacy, why now? The rain grew louder, insistent, urging me to move. I sat on the couch, the envelope heavy in my hands, and peeled it open slowly. The paper inside was crisp, her words penned without crossings or hesitation. as if she'd rewritten it a dozen times before letting it go. Elise, it began, no my darling or sweetheart, just my name, raw and unadorned. There's something I've carried for too long, something I should have told you before it got this far. I paused, my breath catching, and read on. She wrote about a summer day when I was 10, a memory I'd half buried until her words pulled it free. I'd set up a lemonade stand at the end of our driveway in Savannah, my posters hand-drawn, my sugar packets counted one by one. I'd been so proud, dreaming of coins piling up, of proving I could build something. Vivian, 14 and already sharp, had accidentally knocked over the jug before my first sale, the lemonade pooling on the asphalt like spilled hope. I'd cried, not understanding why she'd done it, thinking she just hated lemonade. But Evelyn's letter told a different story. I saw what she did, she wrote, her words steady but heavy. I stood at the kitchen window watching, and I did nothing. I didn't know how to protect both of you, and in the end I protected neither. My hands felt colder than the window pane beside me, the rain's rhythm a dull ache in my chest. She'd known all along and chosen silence. The letter went deeper, cutting into wounds I thought had scarred over. After my father's death, the family's finances teetered, and Clara's husband Nathan offered stability, a fast promotion for Clara, a stake in the estate for Vivian. They made it look like security, Evelyn wrote, but it was control, and I allowed it. I let them push you out, thinking it would keep us together. It was my failure, not yours. I paused, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. All this time I'd thought her silence was a choice, a rejection. But maybe it had been survival, not just for her, but for me too. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I'm not writing for absolution, she ended, but to ask you to break the pattern. Don't become what hurt you. I sat for a long while, the rain's patter the only sound, the letter open in my lap like a wound laid bare. No tears came, no dramatic exhale, just a quiet unraveling of the story I'd told myself about my family. Evelyn hadn't been cruel like Vivian or calculating like Clara, but her silence had cut just as deep. And yet her words now felt like a crack in the wall, a chance to see her not as a shadow, but as a woman who'd failed and knew it. I stood, crossing to the shelf where I kept fragments of my childhood, a box tucked behind old photo frames, dusty and untouched. Inside I found it, a little blue ledger notebook, creased at the corners, its pages filled with a 10-year-old's dreams. Doodles of coin jars, break-even charts in marker, and tucked between two pages, a wrinkled sticky note in my own childish scrawl. One day I'll have a big vault, and I won't leave anyone out. I blinked hard, a smile slipping through, not the kind for photos, but the kind that settles when something clicks into place. That girl hadn't known what was coming, but she'd known what mattered. The ledger felt heavier now, a bridge to the girl I'd been and the woman I was becoming. I set it back in the box, the letter beside it, and returned to the window. Savannah's lights blurred through the wet glass, the city humming with secrets and second chances. Evelyn's confession changed nothing and everything. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me a choice, to carry her guilt or to build something new. Tomorrow I'd walk into the bank's vault office, not just to claim Arthur's trust, but to rewrite the rules my family had lived by. And when I did, I'd carry that ledger's promise with me. A vault big enough for Mrs. Calhoun, for Sophie, for anyone who'd been left out. The Savannah morning was sharp, the kind that cut through the haze of last night's rain and left the city gleaming. I stood at the edge of River Street, the Savannah River rolling lazily behind me, its surface catching the sun like a mirror daring me to look closer. My wine-red scarf was tucked neatly around my neck, its torn edge hidden but not forgotten, a quiet reminder of the battles I'd already fought. Today wasn't about running or hiding. It was about claiming what was mine. I adjusted the black folio under my arm, its weight steadying me, and headed toward the bank's legacy vault office, a place few ever saw, where Savannah's financial history was etched into stone. The side entrance was discreet, tucked down a corridor most customers never noticed. A security guard expecting me nodded silently and pressed a biometric panel. The private elevator chimed softly, its brass interior stark, no music, no mirrors, just the hum of ascent. My boots echoed faintly as I stepped out onto the top floor, where oak walls bore the names of men and women who'd shaped this city's wealth. Arthur Boone's name was among them, carved deep, a promise he'd kept even after death. I pushed through the thick oak door into the boardroom, where 7 men and women sat around a wide oval table, their faces a mix of curiosity and caution. "Good morning," I said, my voice calm but clear, cutting through the room's heavy silence. I set the folio down, its leather whispering against the polished wood. Robert Templeton, the eldest board member, grey suit crisp as his gaze, nodded once. "Ms. Harper," he said, his tone measured, "we've been expecting you." The others shifted in their chairs, their eyes flicking between me and the folio. I didn't sit. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. "This isn't a courtesy update," I began, opening the folio to reveal a stack of documents, each one a piece of the puzzle I'd spent years assembling. As of last Thursday, the 1954 Boone Land Trust, chaired by my grandfather, Arthur Boone, is officially merged into the primary holdings of this bank's foundation. As the named beneficiary, I hold majority control. The room stilled, the air crisp with the weight of legal consequence. I slid a contract across the table, its pages detailing the trust's assets, 3,000 acres of coastal Georgia land, now valued in the billions, and the financial architecture of Shell Code Holdings, my invisible empire. Templeton leaned forward, scanning the papers. "You've had this structured for some time, haven't you?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. 14 months, I said, meeting his gaze, "since I saw my family try to bury Arthur's legacy." A younger board member, a woman with sharp eyes, nodded, her pen poised but still. I continued, my voice steady. "Vivian Tate, your branch manager, has been misallocating funds from partnered entities, including Shell Code Holdings. I have evidence." I placed a USB drive on the table, its contents provided by Lila, the junior teller who'd watched Vivian's collapse yesterday. Emails, transaction logs, and signed overrides, all dated within the last year. The boardroom's silence deepened, broken only by the faint hum of the river outside. I didn't mention Vivian's name again. I didn't need to. Her absence was louder than any accusation. Lila's evidence, slipped to me last night in a quiet corner of a River Street cafe, painted a clear picture. Vivian had diverted funds meant for community programs to personal accounts, assuming no one would notice. But I had. I always did. Templeton cleared his throat. "We've been waiting for someone like you since Arthur passed," he said, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "He spoke of you often, said you'd surprise us all." The words landed heavier than I expected, a validation I hadn't known I needed. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "He gave me the tools," I said. "I just used them." The board voted unanimously, no debate. Vivian's suspension was immediate, pending a full ethics review. I didn't gloat. There was no need. The room felt smaller as I gathered my folio, the weight of Arthur's trust now mine to carry forward. As I turned to leave, Templeton called after me. "Ms. Harper, what's next?" I paused, my hand on the door. "A new charter," I said. "One that holds everyone accountable, starting with my family." The elevator ride down was quiet, but my mind raced. Vivian's fall was just the beginning. Clara, Nathan, and Evelyn were waiting, their panic brewing like a storm over Tybee Island. I stepped out into Savannah's morning light, the river glinting like a promise I'd keep. Lila was waiting by the side entrance, her hands fidgeting but her eyes bright. "You did it," she whispered, a smile breaking through. I nodded, handing her a card with my nonprofit's name. "We're not done," I said. "You in?" Her nod was all I needed. Back in my apartment, I stood by the window, my scarf draped over my shoulders. Savannah's squares glowed under the midday sun, their oaks whispering of legacy and loss. The boardroom had been a victory, but the real battle was coming. A family dinner where I'd face Clara's charm, Nathan's desperation, and Evelyn's silence. I touched the scarf's torn edge, feeling Arthur's words echo. Build something they can't ignore. Tomorrow I'd walk into that beach house, not as a sister, but as a force, and I'd make them see. The drive to Tybee Island was quiet, the late afternoon sun painting the marshes gold as I crossed the causeway. Savannah's city hum faded, replaced by the rhythmic crash of waves and the briny scent of the coast. My wine-red scarf lay folded on the passenger seat, its torn edge a silent partner in this journey. I wasn't heading to a family dinner as a daughter or a sister. I was going as the executor of Arthur's trust, armed with truths my family thought they'd buried. The beach house loomed ahead, its white clapboard glowing against the dunes, a place that once held laughter but now felt like a stage for a reckoning. I parked and stepped out, the sand crunching under my boots. The air was sharp with salt and memory, carrying the ghost of childhood summers when I'd run these shores with Clara and Vivian, before their laughter turned sharp. My black folio was heavy in my hands, its contents a map of their betrayals, forged documents, misused funds, a legacy stolen. I adjusted my navy blouse, its tailored fit a quiet armor, and walked up the steps. The door was open, the scent of rosemary and garlic wafting out, a facade of warmth my family had perfected. Inside, the dining room was lit by a warm pendant light, the long table set with linen and crystal, as if this were just another celebration. Clara stood at the head, her smile too bright, her Chanel earrings glinting. Nathan hovered nearby, his tie slightly askew, his grin strained. Vivian sat at the far end, her face pale, her eyes avoiding mine. Evelyn, my mother, perched delicately at the table's edge, her pearl necklace clasped tight, her expression unreadable. Extended family filled the room, cousins, aunts, a few of Nathan's investor friends, their chatter faltering as I entered. "Elise, you made it," Clara cooed, gliding toward me like we were lunching at a country club. "Someone's glowing today." I didn't respond, just set my folio on the marble buffet, its thud cutting through her words. Nathan coughed, forcing a laugh. "You look grounded, Elise. That's a good thing." I tilted my glass, letting the candlelight catch its rim, and said nothing. The silence was my opening move. The waitress took drink orders, wine for Clara, Nathan copying her, water for Vivian, chamomile tea for Evelyn. Then Clara leaned in, her voice syrupy. "Elise, something's different about you. A calm, almost serene. Are you meditating? Yoga?" Nathan chuckled, too loud. "Or maybe just making smart investments. I've been meaning to ask about a project I'm kicking off. Thought you might give it a look, as a favor." Evelyn clasped her hands, her voice trembling for effect. "We've all been through so much since your father passed. Things got complicated, but we were holding it together." I counted in my head. Not once did they say, "We worried about you," or "We should have reached out." Just we, like they were a unit, and I was the misfit. I set my glass down. Did any of you ever wonder what happened to Arthur's Pennsylvania Land Trust? The shift was instant, like the air dropped 20 degrees. Clara sat up straighter, Nathan blinked, Evelyn's hands tightened around her teacup. Vivian broke the silence, her voice thin. "That trust was dissolved years ago, wasn't it?" I opened the folio, pulling out a folder stamped active. "Actually," I said, meeting Vivian's stare, "it wasn't. It was forgotten, buried. But I never let it die." Evelyn whispered, "You kept it?" I nodded. "I rebuilt it, quietly, while you were signing away what wasn't yours." The waiter appeared, holding a leather check holder. "One bill or separate tonight?" I stood, my voice even. "Everyone covers their own." Gasps rippled through the room. I opened the folder, my hands steady. "This is the trust, signed by Dad, equal distribution for his daughters." I slid out a forged amendment, dated 2 weeks before his stroke. "And this is what you replaced it with." I turned to a PDF on my phone, projected onto a small screen Nathan had brought for his investors. "This is Evelyn's signature, authorizing the transfer of our Oregon vineyard to Clara's offshore account." Heads turned. A cousin coughed into his napkin. I continued, scrolling through transaction logs. "And this is the STEM endowment for young women, repurposed for Clara's real estate ventures." Clara's lip twitched. "She gave me permission," she snapped, pointing at Evelyn. "You don't know everything, Elise." I met her eyes. The date on this is the same day Evelyn was in surgery in Atlanta. The room cracked open. An uncle muttered, "Disgraceful," and left. A couple from Dad's side slipped out silently. Clara flung her napkin onto the table. This is what you do, Elise. You dig until there's nothing left. You've always been jealous. I turned to her, my voice low. No, Clara. I just wanted to be seen. You wanted to erase me. Evelyn said nothing, her eyes fixed on her plate, listening to something older than the voices around her. I closed the folder, leaving it on the table. This house has 2 doors, I said, my gaze sweeping the room. I'm walking out the one you didn't build. I moved toward the exit, the waves crashing outside, a rhythm that matched my pulse. Sophie, Clara's daughter, lingered in the doorway, her eyes wide but not angry. She stepped aside, but her hand brushed mine, a silent question. Outside, the Tybee air was clean, sharp with salt. I didn't look back, but I felt their silence behind me, louder than any argument. The folder lay on Clara's marble table, her throne now a relic. Tomorrow, Savannah would wake to a story not of my making, a story that would spread beyond this beach house and into the world. And when it did, I'd be ready to build something new, something they couldn't touch. The morning after the Tybee Island showdown, Savannah woke under a soft grey sky, the kind that made even the city's historic squares feel hushed, like they were holding their breath. I sat on a bench in Pulaski Square, my wine-red scarf draped over my shoulders, its torn edge catching the faint breeze. The air smelled of cut grass and damp earth, a quiet contrast to the storm I'd left behind in that beach house. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. Clara's number had flashed across the screen twice since last night, Nathan's once, even Evelyn's, but I wasn't ready to hear their voices, their half-apologies or veiled threats. I'd left the truth on their table, and now it was theirs to choke on. I opened my phone, not to answer calls but to check the news. A notification caught my eye, a post on a financial justice blog, one I'd followed for years but never expected to see my name on. The headline read, Savannah Bank Scandal, Ethics Violations Exposed by Hidden Heir. My heart stilled, not with fear, but with a strange calm. I tapped the article, the screen glowing under the oak's dappled shade. An anonymous tip from within the Savannah Riverfront Bank, it began, has revealed systemic misconduct by branch manager Vivian Tate, including misallocation of funds from high-profile accounts like Shellcode Holdings. My name wasn't mentioned, but Arthur's was, his legacy tied to the trust I'd reclaimed. The article quoted a source. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. Lila. It had to be her. The junior teller's nervous hands, her quiet nod at the bank's side entrance yesterday, flashed in my mind. She'd slipped me the evidence of Vivian's misconduct, but I hadn't expected her to go further, to tip off a reporter. The article wasn't flashy, no tabloid drama, just cold, precise data. Transaction logs, emails, dates. It was spreading, shared across financial forums, ethics watchdogs, even a few Savannah social media groups. Comments piled up. Who's behind Shellcode? Arthur Boone's granddaughter? This is why you don't mess with family trusts. I closed the app, my breath steady, but deep. The world was listening now, and I hadn't even raised my voice. A memory surfaced, unbidden, of Arthur's friend, Mr. Holloway, a wiry man with a coat pocket always jingling with peppermint candies. He'd visited our Savannah home when I was a girl, his laughter filling the gaps my family's silence left. After Arthur's death, he'd pulled me aside at the funeral, his eyes kind but fierce. Your granddad built that trust for you, Elise, he'd said, pressing a candy into my hand. One day, you'll need to know you mattered. That day'll come, mark me. I'd forgotten his words until now, but the article quoted him, his voice carrying across years. Elise was always the one no one saw coming. My throat tightened, not with tears but with gratitude. Holloway had kept his promise, just as Arthur had. I tucked my phone away and leaned back, the bench's wood cool against my spine. Pulaski Square was quiet, a few joggers passing, a dog sniffing the grass near a fountain. Savannah's oaks rustled above, their moss swaying like curtains hiding secrets. The article wasn't about me, not really. It was about Arthur's faith, about the legacy I'd fought to reclaim. But it shifted something in me, a weight lifting, like I'd been carrying their laughter too long. Vivian's suspension was public now, her license under review. Clara's offshore accounts were flagged for audits. The truth was a storm I hadn't started but wouldn't stop. My phone buzzed again, this time a text, not a call. I glanced at the screen. Sophie, Clara's daughter. "Can we meet?" it read. "I'm not like them. I want to understand." My fingers hovered, a flicker of doubt creeping in. Sophie had lingered at the beach house, her eyes wide but not angry, her hand brushing mine as I left. She was 20, studying finance at Savannah State, caught in her mother's shadow but reaching for light. I typed back, "Tomorrow Forsyth Park, noon," and hit send. The reply was instant. "Thank you." I smiled, small but real. Maybe not everyone in my family was lost. I stood, my scarf slipping slightly, and walked toward River Street. The city felt different today, its cobblestones steadier under my boots. I passed the bank, its glass doors locked, a discreet sign noting temporary closure for audit. Lila was inside, I knew, her quiet courage a spark I hadn't expected. I'd offered her a role at my nonprofit yesterday, and her nod had felt like a bridge to something new. Savannah's river glinted beside me, its current slow but relentless, like the truth now spreading beyond my control. That night, in my apartment overlooking Forsyth Park, I sat at my dining table, the scarf folded beside me. The radiator hummed, the air warm with peppermint tea. I opened my laptop, the screen flickering to life, and checked the Shellcode Holdings portal. The withdrawal was complete, $3.5 billion moved, the bank's accounts frozen. But it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the silence I'd broken, the legacy I'd reclaimed. I closed the laptop and picked up the scarf, its torn edge soft under my fingers. Tomorrow I'd meet Sophie, maybe build something with her, something my family couldn't touch. And soon I'd walk into my nonprofit's new office, a vault of my own making, where no one would be left out. Savannah's historic district glowed under a late morning sun, its brick-paved streets alive with the hum of tourists and the scent of jasmine drifting from hidden courtyards. I walked toward my nonprofit's new office, a sleek steel and glass building nestled between century-old townhouses. My wine-red scarf was loose around my neck, its torn edge catching the breeze, a quiet companion in this new chapter. The weight of the past week, Vivian's collapse, Clara's unraveling, Evelyn's letter, Sophie's text, settled on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a foundation. Today wasn't about tearing down, it was about building up. The office's sign, embossed in brushed silver, read Sparrow Foundation, Empowering Women in STEM. The name was a nod to my alias, M. Sparrow, and to Arthur, who'd called me his little sparrow when I was a girl, always flitting, always watching. I pushed through the glass doors, the air cool and clean, smelling faintly of new paint. The space was modest but solid. Open desks, a conference room with river views, walls lined with photos of young women coding, designing, dreaming. We'd moved in last month, funded by the redirected assets I'd pulled from my family's misuse. This was my vault, not of money but of possibility. I walked through, my boots soft on the hardwood, imagining the hum of voices that would soon fill this place. Lila had joined us yesterday, her banking experience a quiet strength we'd need to scale. She'd smiled when I handed her a keycard, her nervous fidgeting gone, replaced by a spark I recognized, someone finding their place. I paused by a window, the Savannah River glinting outside, its current a reminder of time's relentless flow. My hand slipped into my bag, brushing the faded blue savings book I'd carried today, its pages a tether to the girl who'd dreamed of vaults big enough for everyone. I left the office and headed to Chippewa Square, a short walk away. The square was quiet, its oaks casting long shadows, their moss swaying like whispers of Savannah's past. I sat on a wooden bench, the savings book in my lap, its corners curled from years of hiding. I opened it gently, careful not to tear the fragile pages. Most were blank now. Arthur's deposits long moved, but at the back, tucked into a pocket, was a yellowing note in his neat hand. For the biggest heart. Use it when they forget who you are. I blinked hard, a smile breaking through, the kind that slips in when you realize you've been seen all along. A small flutter caught my eye. A sparrow landed on the bench, just out of reach, its dark eyes steady, not startled or begging, just present. I froze, my breath soft, as if moving might break the moment. The bird tilted its head, then hopped closer, its wings a quiet rustle. I didn't shoo it away. I didn't need to. It stayed, sharing the stillness, a living echo of Arthur's nickname and my alias. My heart slowed, a peace settling in, deeper than the victory in the boardroom or the storm at Tybee. This was what I'd been building toward. Not just a non-profit, not just a trust, but a place where I could be whole. I closed the savings book, my fingers lingering on its cover. The sparrow flitted away, disappearing into the oaks, and I leaned back, the bench's wood cool against my spine. Savannah's square hummed around me, children laughing near the fountain, a busker strumming a guitar, the city alive with second chances. I thought of Sophie, our meeting set for tomorrow in Forsyth Park. Her text had been a lifeline, a chance to break the cycle my family had spun. She wasn't Clara, wasn't Vivian. Maybe she could be part of this vault too. My phone buzzed, a message from Lila. First grant application submitted. We're live. I smiled, typing back. You're a rock star. The Sparrow Foundation was small now, but it would grow, fueled by the funds I'd reclaimed and the dreams I'd once scribbled in that ledger. I stood, tucking the savings book into my bag, and walked toward River Street. The city felt lighter today, its cobblestones a path I'd chosen, not one I'd been pushed onto. I passed the bank, its doors still locked, its audit ongoing. Vivian was out there, somewhere, her career in tatters, but I didn't feel triumph, just closure. That night in my apartment, I sat at my dining table, the scarf folded beside me. The radiator hummed, the air warm with peppermint tea. I opened the savings book one last time, tracing Arthur's note with my thumb. They forgot, I whispered, but I didn't. The sparrow's visit felt like a sign, a quiet nod from the universe that I was on the right path. Tomorrow I'd meet Sophie, maybe plant a seed for something new. But soon I'd face my family one last time, not as a daughter, but as a reckoning, leaving behind a charter to ensure they'd never erase anyone again. My vault was open now, and I wouldn't let anyone close it. The wind was sharp that morning, threading through the old wrought iron gate of my childhood home in Savannah's Ardsley Park like a whisper that had waited years to be spoken. I stepped onto the familiar stone path, my boots tapping softly against the moss-flecked pavers, my wine-red scarf loose around my neck, its torn edge catching the breeze. The air smelled of magnolia and memory, heavy with the weight of a house that had once held me but never truly saw me. I wasn't here as a daughter today, not as the girl Clara and Vivian had laughed out of their world. I was Elise Harper, executor of Arthur Boone's trust, architect of Shellcode Holdings, and I was here to close the final door. The folio under my arm felt heavier than ever, not from its papers, but from the truths they carried. A new family ethics charter, a legal tether to ensure accountability where my family had sown chaos. The past week had unraveled them. Vivian's collapse at the bank, Clara's unravelling at Tybee, Evelyn's letter, the public storm of Lila's tip to the press. Sophie's text yesterday, after our meeting in Forsyth Park, lingered in my mind. I'm in, Elise. Let's build something real. Her voice, earnest and free of her mother's venom, had been a spark of hope, a bridge to a future I hadn't dared imagine. But first I had to bury the past. I didn't knock. The front door creaked open, its oak frame worn from decades of Savannah's humid summers. The foyer was dim, the chandelier unlit, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and rosemary from last night's dinner. Clara's voice floated from the dining room, bright and performative, entertaining again. Extended family, old friends, maybe a new investor, desperate to salvage her sinking empire. I walked straight in, my steps deliberate, the folio a quiet weight in my hands. The chatter faltered mid-sentence, forks paused mid-air, a cousin from Hilton Head coughing into his linen napkin. Clara stood at the head of the table, her blonde hair perfect, her smile cracking at the edges. Elise, she said, her voice too high, too forced. This is unexpected. Nathan beside her tugged at his collar, his investor grin gone. Vivian sat at the far end, her face pale, her hands clasped tight, as if holding herself together. Evelyn perched delicately, her pearl necklace a fragile shield, her eyes meeting mine with a flicker of something, regret maybe, or resignation. I set the folio on the marble buffet, its thud echoing like a gavel. "If I may," I said, my voice calm, "I'd like to make a final withdrawal." The silence was tight, a wire ready to snap. Clara laughed, brittle and sharp. "Elise, if this is another dramatic stunt—" I cut her off, my gaze steady. "Not a stunt, Clara." A settlement. I opened the folio, pulling out the family ethics charter, its pages crisp with legal weight. "This ensures no one in this family, present or future, can manipulate trusts, forge signatures, or erase heirs. It's effective immediately, tied to Arthur's trust and the Sparrow Foundation." I slid the document across the table, its whisper louder than Clara's protest. Vivian's voice broke the quiet, thin and raw. "You're not selling the land, are you?" Her eyes were wide, almost pleading, a shadow of the woman who'd called me a beggar. I tilted my head, my scarf's torn edge catching the light. "The land stays," I said, "but it's not yours to touch. It funds the foundation now, for women like Sophie, like Lila, like me." Clara's hand trembled, her wine glass clinking against the table. "You've always held this resentment," she snapped, "digging until there's nothing left." I met her eyes, my voice low but unyielding. "I held receipts, Clara. Resentment was optional." I turned to the room, my gaze sweeping the stunned faces. "You chose your doors, laughter, lies, silence. I'm choosing mine." Evelyn's hands tightened around her teacup, but she didn't speak. Her letter had said enough. Its confession a crack I'd carry but not mend today. Nathan stammered, "Elise, we're family. You can't just—" I raised a hand, silencing him. "Exactly. That's why I didn't take everything. Just the part you tried to erase." Sophie stood in the doorway, her dark hair loose, her eyes bright with something like pride. She'd been at our Forsyth Park meeting yesterday, her notebook filled with questions about the Sparrow Foundation, her voice eager to break free of Clara's shadow. I nodded to her, a quiet acknowledgement, and she smiled, small but real. The room felt smaller now, the chandelier's dim glow a relic of a world they'd built without me. I closed the folio, its snap final. "This house has 2 doors," I said, echoing my words from Tybee. "I'm walking out the one you didn't build." I moved toward the exit, the oak floors creaking under my boots. No one followed, no one spoke, just the hum of the ocean beyond the city, a rhythm that matched my pulse. Outside, Savannah's air was clean, sharp with magnolia and salt. I paused on the stone path, the gate clanging shut behind me. A young reporter waited on the sidewalk, his notebook in hand, his camera down, a hesitant smile on his face. "Ms. Harper," he said, his voice soft. "Someone wanted you to be heard, thought you should know." I nodded, my scarf fluttering in the breeze. "They were," I said, and walked on. Ellis Square was a short walk away, its fountain glinting under the setting sun. I sat on a bench, the city humming around me, tourists laughing, a busker strumming, the oaks whispering of legacy and loss. Sophie found me there, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes bright. "I'm ready," she said, sitting beside me. "The foundation, stem, all of it. I want to build with you." I smiled, the kind that settles deep. "Then let's start," I said, handing her a key card to the Sparrow Foundation's office. I reached into my bag, pulling out the faded blue savings book, its corners curled from years of hiding. I opened it, Arthur's note still tucked inside. "For the biggest heart." I brushed my thumb across it, whispering. I withdrew everything I needed. My name, my loyalty, my love. The words felt like a release, a final letting go. I'd taken it all back from those who'd wasted it and invested it here, in Sophie, in Lila, in the women who'd walked through my vault's doors. Savannah's sunset painted the square in gold, the river beyond it a ribbon of light. The sparrow from Chippewa Square hadn't followed me, but its memory did. A quiet nod from Arthur, from the girl I'd been. I stood, Sophie at my side, and walked toward the Foundation's office, its silver sign glowing in the distance. This was my legacy now, not what I left behind but what I cleaned up. The house, the family, the laughter. They were behind me, closed off by a gate I'd never reopen. Ahead was a vault big enough for everyone, and I was ready to fill it. That's my story, listeners. What's the one withdrawal you'd make to find your freedom? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss touching stories. Leave a like and then comment below what you thought of the emotional stories. See you in the next video.